I never thought a single crumpled $100 bill would mark the beginning of my end. If someone had told me that night that throwing his money back in his face would turn the most dangerous man in the city into my shadow, my hunter, my obsession, I would have laughed until I cried. But here I am years later, still tasting the metallic fear on my tongue every time I remember how his eyes changed when that bill hit the marble floor between us. My name is Mara Valenti, and this is the story of how I became the one thing Vincenzo Moretti could not possess, and how that impossibility drove him to tear the world apart to try. It started on a rain-soaked October evening in 2022 at Il Capriccio, a dimly lit restaurant on the edge of Little Italy that pretended to be respectable. The kind of place where politicians ate osso buco next to men whose names were whispered in federal wiretaps. I was 24, working double shifts to keep the lights on in the tiny apartment I shared with my grandmother, the only family I had left after my parents vanished when I was 12. Vanished. That's the word we used. Not dead, not murdered. Vanished. Because no one ever found the bodies, and no one ever looked hard enough. I knew who ran that part of the city. Everyone did. The Moretti family had owned those streets for 3 generations, and Vincenzo, 34, heir apparent after his father's retirement, was already a legend whispered in back rooms. Cold, precise, untouchable. I had seen him once before, from across the dining room, sitting in the corner booth that was permanently reserved for him. He hadn't looked at me then. I was invisible. Just another waitress in black, carrying trays of overpriced wine to men who never remembered my face. That night, the restaurant was nearly empty because of the storm. Thunder rattled the windows, and the streets outside were rivers. I was wiping down the bar when the hostess led him in. Alone. No entourage, no bodyguards visible. Just Vincenzo Moretti in a charcoal overcoat, water dripping from his dark hair, looking like something carved out of night itself. He took his usual booth. I drew the short straw. I approached with the menu I knew he wouldn't open. "Good evening, Mr. Moretti. The usual?" His gaze lifted slowly. Gray eyes, almost silver under the low light, and so cold I felt the temperature drop. He didn't answer immediately. He studied me the way a surgeon studies a body before the first cut. Detached, calculating, deciding where to begin. "Macallan 25. Neat," he said finally. Voice low, controlled. "And the Branzino." I nodded and turned. I felt his stare on my back the entire way to the kitchen. The evening crawled. He ate in silence. No phone. No conversation. Just that relentless gaze tracking me every time I crossed the room. I told myself it was nothing. Men like him looked at women like toys. I had learned long ago how to become part of the furniture. When the check came, the bill was 187s. He laid down 200s and stood, buttoning his coat. I approached to collect it. "Keep the change," he said without looking at me. The second bill was folded into a tight square. I picked it up, unfolded it. Inside was a crisp $100 bill, separate from the payment. A tip. $100 for a drink and a fish. I stared at it. In that moment, something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the memory of my grandmother coughing blood into tissues she tried to hide from me. Maybe it was the stack of medical bills on our kitchen table. Maybe it was the way men like him threw money at people like me, as if it erased the power they held. The way they could destroy lives with a phone call, and then tip $100 like it balanced the scale. I looked up. He was already at the door, Back to me. Mr. Moretti. He paused, turned slowly. I walked toward him, the bill held between two fingers. The restaurant was silent except for the rain. I don't want your money. I held it out. His brow lifted a fraction, the first expression I'd seen on his face all night. Take it back. For a long moment he only looked at me. Then he stepped forward, close enough that I smelled cedar and gun oil beneath the rain on his coat. Keep it, he said quietly. No. I opened my fingers. The bill fluttered to the floor between us. The air changed, thickened. I felt every eye in the restaurant that wasn't supposed to be watching, suddenly. Watching. His gaze dropped to the bill on the marble, then rose to my face. No one spoke. Then he smiled. Not warm, not amused. Something darker. Like recognition. He didn't pick it up. He simply turned and walked out into the storm. I stood there shaking, unsure if I had just signed my own death warrant. Before we continue the story, please drop a comment telling me where you're watching this from, and don't forget to subscribe to Mara's Betrayal. The next morning, the restaurant manager called me into his office before my shift. His face was pale. Mara, what the hell did you do last night? I didn't answer. He called, personally, said to tell you the tip is still yours, and that you'll accept it next time. I laughed, short and sharp. There won't be a next time. I'm not serving him again. The manager rubbed his temples. You don't understand. You don't say no to Vincenzo Moretti. Not ever. I walked out. But that night, the $100 bill was folded neatly on my station when I arrived, placed there by someone while I wasn't looking. Crisp. New. As if the one I'd dropped had never existed. I threw it in the trash. The next night, there were two. I burned them in the alley sink. By the end of the week, every surface I touched, my locker, my apron pocket, the inside of my purse, held crisp hundreds. Never more than one at a time. Never with a note. Just silent insistence. I stopped throwing some away. I started donating them anonymously to the cancer ward where my grandmother received treatment. It felt like defiance, using his money against him. I didn't see him again for 3 weeks. Then one night the power went out across the block. The restaurant plunged into darkness lit only by emergency lights and candles. Guests murmured nervously. I was in the wine cellar retrieving bottles when I heard footsteps on the stairs behind me. I turned. He stood at the bottom of the stairs, candle light flickering across his face, coat unbuttoned, hands in pockets. We need to talk, he said. My heart slammed against my ribs. The cellar was narrow, cold, no exit except past him. About what? My voice didn't shake. I was proud of that. About why you think you can refuse what I offer. I lifted my chin. Because I decide what I accept. Not you. Something shifted in his expression. Not anger, curiosity, hunger. He stepped closer, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to hold his gaze. Do you know who I am, Mara? I did. Everyone did, but I answered anyway. Yes. And you still threw my money back? Yes. He studied me for a long moment. Most people beg for my attention, he said softly. You run from it. I'm not most people. No, he murmured. You're not. He reached into his coat. I tensed. He withdrew a single bill. Held it out. This time I didn't take it. He didn't drop it either. Instead, he stepped forward and slid it slowly into the front pocket of my apron, fingers brushing my hip through the fabric. My breath caught. Next time, he said, you'll keep it. He turned and climbed the stairs, leaving me in the flickering dark with the weight of that bill burning against my skin. I didn't sleep that night. 2 days later, my grandmother's oncologist called with impossible news. An anonymous donor had paid for an experimental treatment previously denied by insurance. Full coverage, immediate start. I knew before I even checked my apron pocket and found the $100 still there, now folded around a small white card. On it, in precise black ink, accept it. Fee, I stared at those 2 words until they blurred. He wasn't buying me. He was teaching me that refusal had consequences for the people I loved. That was the first time I truly understood how dangerous he was. Not because he threatened, but because he helped. And I hated him for it. I kept the card. I told myself it was evidence. Proof, if I ever needed to go to the police. But we both knew I wouldn't. The police in this city were either bought or terrified, and I had no illusion about which side Vincenzo Moretti owned. I burned the $100 bill that night anyway. Watched the flames curl the paper in the kitchen sink while my grandmother slept in the next room. The smoke alarm chirped once before I smothered the fire under running water. The ashes swirled down the drain like black snow. The treatment started the following week. My grandmother came home from the hospital with color in her cheeks for the first time in months. She kept touching the new port in her arm as if it were a miracle. "Who paid for this, Mara?" she asked quietly one evening, her voice raspy from years of smoking before the cancer. "An anonymous donor," I lied. She looked at me for a long time. She had always seen through me. "Be careful who you owe," she said. I couldn't sleep after that. I lay in the dark, listening to the city breathe outside our window. Sirens, horns, the low rumble of delivery trucks, and felt the walls closing in. He didn't come back to the restaurant for a month, but he was everywhere else. A black town car idled across the street from our apartment building 3 nights in a row. Never the same driver. Never close enough to confront. Just watching. The corner bodega suddenly stocked my grandmother's favorite brand of Italian biscuits, the one that had been discontinued years ago. The owner shrugged when I asked where they came from. Gift from a supplier. My schedule at Il Capriccio changed without explanation. The manager moved me to earlier shifts, quieter hours. "Better tips," he said, avoiding my eyes. I knew why. Vincenzo didn't want me working late anymore. Alone in the alleys. Vulnerable. The realization made my skin crawl. I started carrying a knife in my boot. A small switchblade I bought from a pawn shop with cash. It felt ridiculous. A waitress with a blade against a man who could order deaths with a nod. But it was something. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late November, the air sharp enough to cut. I was walking home after closing, cutting through the park to save time. The path was lit by old sodium lamps that turned everything orange and sickly. I heard footsteps behind me, not hurried, measured. I didn't turn around. I lengthened my stride. The footsteps matched. My hand slipped into my coat pocket, fingers closing around the knife. When I reached the fountain at the center of the park, I stopped, turned. He was 10 feet away, alone again. Hands in the pockets of a long black coat, collar turned up against the wind. "I'm not following you," he said before I could speak. I laughed, bitter. "Then why are you here?" "I was waiting." "For what?" "For you to notice." I stared at him. "You've been watching me for weeks." "Yes." Why? He took one step closer. Because you interest me. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. I pulled the knife out, held it low between us. He didn't flinch. His gaze dropped to the blade, then back to my face. You think that will protect you? I think it makes me feel less helpless. Something flickered in his eyes. Not amusement. Something deeper. You're not helpless, Mara. You're the only person in this city who has ever looked at me and said no. And that makes you stalk me? That makes me want to understand you. I shook my head. You don't get to understand me. You don't get to buy me. You don't get to decide what happens to the people I love. He was silent for a long moment. Then, your grandmother's treatment is progressing well. Rage surged through me so fast my vision tunneled. Don't you dare speak about her. I'm not threatening her, he said quietly. I'm stating a fact. She's responding to the drug. The doctors are optimistic. I took a step toward him, knife raised. Stop helping us. I can't. Why not? Because you won't let me help you directly. So I help the only way I can. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive the blade into his shoulder just to see if he bled like a normal man. Instead, I whispered, You're a monster. Yes, he said simply, but I'm your monster now. The words hung between us like frost. I backed away slowly, knife still out, until the shadows swallowed me. He didn't follow. If you're still watching the story till now, drop a comment so I know you're with me. I quit the restaurant the next day. I walked into the manager's office and dropped my apron on his desk. I'm done. He didn't argue, just nodded, eyes down. He said you might. I froze. He told you I was quitting? He told me to make it easy for you. I left without another word. For 2 weeks I searched for new work. Anywhere. Coffee shops, retail, temp agencies. Nothing. Every interview ended the same way. Polite smiles, promises to call. Silence. I knew why. He was boxing me in. By Christmas Eve, the savings were gone. The rent was late. My grandmother's next treatment cycle loomed, and even with the anonymous coverage, there were copays, medications, transportation. I sat at the kitchen table at 3 a.m., staring at the eviction notice taped to our door, and felt something inside me fracture. I called the only number I had. The card he'd left in my pocket weeks earlier had a single phone number written beneath the accept it. It rang twice. Mara, he said, as if he'd been waiting. I hated how my name sounded in his mouth. I need to talk to you. I know. In person. There was a pause. Tomorrow night, midnight. The roof of the old St. Agnes Church on Broome. Come alone. He hung up. I didn't sleep. The church had been abandoned for years, a Gothic skeleton in the heart of the city. I climbed the fire escape at 11:58, the metal groaning under my weight, snow dusting my hair. He was already there. Standing at the edge of the roof, city lights glittering below him like scattered diamonds. No coat despite the cold. Just a black suit, hands in pockets, breath visible in the air. I stopped 10 feet away. You wanted to talk, he said without turning. I need a job. Now he turned, slowly. I can give you one. What kind? Whatever you want? I laughed sharp. Nothing illegal. His mouth curved. Not quite a smile. I have legal businesses. I'm sure you do. Silence stretched. What do you really want from me, Vincenzo? He stepped closer. Close enough that I could see snowflakes melting on his lashes. I want you to stop fighting me. That's not going to happen. Then I want you to fight me knowingly, with your eyes open. I shook my head. I don't understand you. You will. He reached into his coat. I tensed. He pulled out an envelope, thick, held it out. I didn't take it. Inside is enough to cover your rent for a year, your grandmother's co-pays, everything. I stared at the envelope. In exchange for what? Dinner. I blinked. Dinner? One dinner. With me. Tomorrow night. Christmas. That's it? That's it. I searched his face for the trap, found nothing but that steady silver gaze. Why? Because I want to know what you sound like when you're not afraid. I took the envelope. My fingers brushed his. He didn't move. I turned and left without another word. Christmas night, a car arrived at 8 p.m. Sharp. Black Maybach. Driver in a suit who opened the door without speaking. I wore the only nice dress I owned. Black, simple, bought for my cousin's wedding years ago. We drove out of the city, upstate, to a house I didn't know existed. A sprawling stone estate on a lake frozen solid, lights glowing warm against the snow. He waited at the top of the steps. No staff visible, just him. He took my coat himself, led me into a dining room where a table was set for two, candles burning low. We ate in near silence. Food I didn't taste. Wine I barely sipped. He watched me the entire time. After dessert, tiramisu he said he made himself, he leaned back. Ask me anything. I set down my fork. Why me? He considered. Because you looked at my money and saw pity, and you hated it. I couldn't deny it. Most people would have taken it and smiled. I'm not most people. No, he said softly. You're the first person who's ever made me feel human. The word hung strangely in his mouth. I stood. Thank you for dinner. He rose too. The money is yours. No strings. I nodded. He walked me to the door. As I stepped into the cold, he spoke again. Mara. I turned. This isn't over. Snow swirled between us. I got in the car and didn't look back. But 3 nights later, I woke to find a single red rose on my pillow. No thorns. No note. The door had been locked. The windows closed. He had been in my room while I slept. And that was the moment I understood. This wasn't obsession. It was possession. And I had just become the thing he would kill to keep. I didn't scream when I found the rose. I didn't run to the police. I didn't call anyone. I sat up in bed, heart pounding so hard I thought it would crack a rib, and stared at the single perfect bloom on my pillow. The scent was faint, almost sweet, mocking the terror clawing up my throat. No broken window, no forced lock. The chain on the door was still fastened from the inside. He had a key, or someone who worked for him did. I picked the rose up by the stem, careful, as if it might bite, and carried it to the kitchen. I laid it on the counter and stared at it for a long time under the harsh fluorescent light. Then I took the sharpest knife we owned and sliced it to pieces. Petals, stem, everything. I dropped the fragments into the garbage disposal and ground them until the motor whined. I told myself it was over. A message sent. But the next morning there was another rose. This time on the kitchen table, in a crystal vase I didn't own. Water still beating on the glass as if it had just been filled. My grandmother was already awake, sitting in her chair by the window with a cup of tea. "Who brought the flower, Kara?" she asked softly. I couldn't lie to her face. "A friend," I said. She looked at me over the rim of her cup. "You don't have friends who can afford baccarat vases." I took the vase and the rose and threw them both into the dumpster behind the building. That night I changed the locks. Paid a locksmith triple to come after hours. New deadbolts, new chain, everything. 2 days later, another rose, this time on my grandmother's bedside table. That was the first time I cried. Not in front of her. Never in front of her. I waited until she was asleep, then locked myself in the bathroom and pressed my face into a towel so she wouldn't hear. I was trapped. He wasn't hurting me. He wasn't even threatening me directly. He was just there, in every corner of my life, inescapable. I stopped sleeping. I lost weight. The shadows under my eyes became permanent. I started looking for ways out. I thought about leaving the city, taking my grandmother and disappearing. But she was too fragile for a sudden move, and I had no money beyond what he'd already given me. The money I hated but had used anyway. I thought about confronting him. I thought about killing him. That thought scared me more than anything else, how easily it came. How I lingered on it in the dark, imagining the weight of a gun in my hand, the recoil, the finality. I wasn't a killer, but he was making me into something I didn't recognize. Then came the invitation. It arrived on heavy cream stock, delivered by hand to our mailbox. No stamp, just my name in that same precise black ink. A charity gala, black tie, February 14th, the Metropolitan Club. A single line beneath the details. Wear red. I burned the invitation. But on the night of the gala, a dress was delivered. Blood red silk, floor length, cut low in the back. My exact size. With it, a pair of heels I would never have been able to afford, and a diamond necklace that made my hands shake when I lifted it from the velvet box. No note this time. Just the dress laid across my bed like a dare. I should have thrown it away. I should have stayed home. But something in me, the part that was exhausted from running, the part that wanted to end this one way or another, made me put it on. I told my grandmother I was going out with friends. She looked at me in that red dress and said nothing, but her eyes were afraid. The car was waiting downstairs. Same silent driver. We drove uptown. The city glittered like broken glass. The Metropolitan Club was ablaze with light. Photographers outside. Security at the door. I gave my name. They checked a list. Let me in. Inside it was all crystal chandeliers and old money. Politicians, CEOs, socialites in diamonds. And him. He stood near the grand staircase, a glass of champagne in his hand, talking to a man I recognized from the news, a federal judge. When he saw me, he stopped speaking mid-sentence. The judge followed his gaze, raised an eyebrow, excused himself. Vincenzo walked toward me slowly, as if the crowd parted for him without being asked. He stopped a foot away. You came. You didn't leave me much choice. His eyes traveled over the dress, the necklace, my face. You look like vengeance, he said quietly. I lifted my chin. I'm here to tell you to stop. He offered his arm. Dance with me first. I didn't take it. He waited. Finally, I placed my hand on his forearm. His muscle was hard beneath the tuxedo sleeve. He led me to the dance floor as the orchestra began a slow waltz. His hand settled at the small of my back, possessive, burning through the silk. We moved in silence for a full minute. Then he spoke, voice low against my ear. You changed the locks. Yes. It didn't work. I noticed. I don't want you afraid of me, Mara. You break into my home. You watch me sleep. You touch my grandmother's things. And you don't want me afraid? He was quiet. I want you aware, he said finally, of how easily I can reach you, of how little stands between us. Why? Because one day you'll understand there's no point resisting. I pulled back to look at him. I will never belong to you. His grip tightened fractionally. You already do. The music swelled. He spun me, pulling me back closer than before. Tell me about your parents, he said suddenly. I stumbled. He steadied me without breaking step. How do you... I know everything about you, but I want to hear it from you. I tried to pull away. He didn't let me. They disappeared when I was 12, I said through clenched teeth. That's all. No, that's not all. I stopped dancing, stood still in the middle of the floor. People flowed around us. Tell me what you know. He studied my face. Your father owed money. To my family. A lot of money. He tried to run. Took your mother with him. The room tilted. I had always known in some buried place that it was debt. That it was something shameful. But hearing it spoken aloud, they're dead, I whispered. Yes. You killed them. He didn't answer immediately. My father did. The air left my lungs. All these years I had carried the grief like a stone, and now it had edges, sharp ones. I stepped back. His hands fell away. You're a Moretti, I said. Your family destroyed mine. Yes. And you're doing this, all of this, knowing that? He didn't look away. Yes. I turned and walked through the crowd, out of the ballroom, down the marble steps. Outside, the cold hit me like a slap. I didn't have a coat. I kept walking. I heard his footsteps behind me. Mara, I spun. You knew, this whole time, and you still... I knew the moment I saw your name on the staff list at Il Capriccio. I laughed. It sounded broken. So this is what? Revenge? Punishment for my father's debt? No. Then what? He stepped closer. Absolution. I stared at him. I was 21 when your parents disappeared. I didn't order it. I didn't stop it. But I knew, and I did nothing. His voice was steady, but something raw flickered in his eyes. When you threw that money back at me, you looked at me like I was filth, and you were right. I couldn't speak. I can't undo what was done to them, but I can give you everything they should have had. Safety, security, a future for your grandmother. At what cost? You. I shook my head. I'm not a payment. No, he said. You're the only thing that's ever made me want to be better than what I am. A car pulled up. His driver. He opened the door. Get in. You'll freeze. I didn't move. He waited. Finally, I got in. He slid in beside me. We rode in silence. When we reached my building, he walked me to the door. At the threshold, he stopped. I won't come inside again unless you ask me to. I looked up at him. Why tell me now? Because lies rot everything they touch. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. He brushed a thumb across my cheek, wiping away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. Then he turned and left. I stood in the doorway long after the car disappeared. That night, I didn't lock the door. Not because I trusted him, but because I was tired of pretending the locks mattered. 3 weeks passed. No roses, no cars watching. No mysterious deposits or gifts. Just silence. My grandmother's health improved steadily. The doctors used words like remarkable recovery. I found a job at a small bookstore in Brooklyn. The owner hired me on the spot, no questions. Life felt almost normal. But I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing his face when he said absolution. I kept hearing my father's debt spoken aloud. I started digging. Old newspaper archives, court records, anything I could find on my parents' disappearance. There was nothing. No missing persons report. No investigation. Just a void. Then, one night in March, my grandmother called me into her room. She was sitting up in bed, looking frail but clear-eyed. "I need to tell you something," she said. I sat beside her. "About your father." My heart stopped. "He didn't just owe money, Mara. He stole from them. Evidence, names, dates. He was going to the FBI. I went very still. The Morettis found out. They made him disappear before he could talk. Your mother, she wouldn't leave without him." Tears rolled down her lined cheeks. "I begged him not to do it, but he thought he could bring them down. Save us all." I held her hand. "Why tell me now?" "Because the current Moretti, Vincenzo, he came to see me, while you were at work." Fear spiked through me. "He what?" "He sat right there." She nodded to the chair. "And he told me everything. Said he was sorry. That he would spend his life making it right if I let him." I stood. "What did you say?" "I told him the only way to make it right was to leave you alone." "And?" "He said he couldn't." She looked at me. "But he promised he would never force you. That it had to be your choice." I left the room. I walked the streets until dawn. When I came home, there was an envelope under my door. Inside, a flash drive, and a note in his handwriting. "Everything your father gathered. Copies of the originals. Untouched by my family. Use it however you want. No strings. I plugged it in. Files, hundreds of them. Ledgers, photos, recordings. Enough to dismantle the Moretti Empire. Enough to send Vincenzo to prison for life." My hand hovered over the keyboard. I could end it all. Right now. But I thought of his face on the gala steps. I thought of absolution. And I realized the most terrifying truth of all. I didn't know what I wanted anymore. I didn't touch the flash drive for 3 days. I left it on the kitchen table like a loaded gun, covered with a dish towel so my grandmother wouldn't see it and ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. Every time I passed it, my stomach twisted. Those files could destroy him. They could also destroy what was left of my family's name, paint my father as an informant, a rat, even if he'd never made it to the FBI. In the world Vincenzo came from, that label followed bloodlines. It could put a target on my grandmother's back from old loyalists who still believed in omerta. And the worst part of me didn't want to use it. Not because I forgave him, but because I had started to understand him. That terrified me more than any rose on my pillow ever had. On the 4th night, I plugged the drive in again. I opened one file at random. A scanned ledger from 2011. My father's handwriting, unmistakable loops on the G's and Y's, listing shipments, dates, dollar amounts. Beside each entry, in red pen, were initials. V.M. Senior Vincenzo Moretti Sr. His father. I closed the file. I opened another. A grainy photo of my parents at a diner booth, taken from across the room. Time-stamped 2 days before they vanished. On the back of the printout, someone had written, "Assets to be recovered." I felt bile rise in my throat. I worked through the night, copying everything to an encrypted cloud folder I paid for with cash at a library computer the next day. Then I wiped the drive, snapped it in half, and dropped the pieces into separate storm drains on my walk home. Insurance. If he ever came for us again, I could still burn him. But I didn't send it to the FBI. I didn't leak it to journalists. I just waited. Spring arrived early that year. The city thawed, and with it, something in me. I kept the bookstore job. I read during slow hours. I took my grandmother to her appointments and watched her grow stronger, hair coming back thin and white. But there. Laughing again at old Italian game shows. And Vincenzo stayed gone. No contact. No shadows. It should have felt like freedom. It felt like withdrawal. I caught myself scanning streets for black cars, checking reflections in windows for his silhouette, listening for footsteps that matched a stride I now knew by heart. I hated myself for it. In May, my grandmother's doctor declared her in remission. We celebrated quietly, homemade lasagna, a single candle in tiramisu, her frail hands clapping when I sang Tanti Auguri off-key. That night, after she slept, I sat on the fire escape with a glass of cheap red wine and looked out over the rooftops. I whispered into the dark, "Thank you." I didn't know if I meant it for God, for medicine, or for him. The next morning, there was an envelope under the door. Heavy cream stock again. Inside, a single ticket to La Scala's touring production of Tosca at the Metropolitan Opera. Best seat in the house, tomorrow night. And a note. I told you, no strings, but if you ever want to talk, I'll be in the same box my father used to own. Row A, center. I'll save the seat beside me. No signature. I almost threw the ticket away. Instead, I wore the red dress again, the one he'd sent for the gala. I told myself it was armor. The Met was golden and echoing, full of perfume and money. I felt eyes on me as I climbed the grand staircase alone, but I kept my head high. The box was easy to find. The door was ajar. He was already there, standing at the railing, looking down at the orchestra tuning. Black tuxedo, no tie. Hands braced on the velvet. He didn't turn when I entered. I closed the door behind me. The click sounded final. "I didn't think you'd come," he said quietly. "I didn't think I would either." He turned then. His eyes took me in slowly. The dress, my hair loose, the absence of fear I'd practiced in the mirror for hours. "You look beautiful." I didn't thank him. I took the seat he'd saved. The lights dimmed. The overture began. We didn't speak during the first act, but I felt him beside me like a heat source. Every breath, every shift of fabric. During intermission, he offered champagne. I took it. We stood at the railing, looking down at the crowd. "Why Tosca?" I asked. He considered. "Because she kills the man who tries to own her." I turned to him. "And you think that's us?" "I think," he said softly, "that you already have the knife." Act the Secu began. Scarpia's palace, coercion, blackmail, the bargain for a life. I watched Tosca's hands shake as she agreed to give herself to save her lover. I felt Vincenzo's gaze on my profile the entire time. When she stabbed Scarpia, when the music crashed and she placed the candles beside his body, I felt tears on my cheeks. The final act. Tosca's leap from the parapet. The orchestra thundered. Curtain. The applause was deafening. But in our box, silence. Finally, I spoke. "I read everything." He nodded. "I kept copies. I assumed you would. I haven't used them." He waited. "Why?" I asked. He turned to face me fully. "Because you're not your father. You don't want justice at the cost of more blood." I looked away. Or maybe I'm just weak. "No," he said firmly. "You're the strongest person I know." I laughed, bitter. "I'm here, aren't I? In your box, wearing your dress, drinking your champagne. You're here because you chose to be." The theater emptied around us. We were almost alone. I stepped closer. "Tell me the truth, Vincenzo. If I asked you to walk away, really walk away, would you?" His jaw tightened. "No." "Why?" "Because I would rather live in a world where you hate me than one where you don't exist in my life at all." I searched his face. "That's not love. That's sickness." "Maybe," he said, "but it's the only kind I'm capable of." I felt something crack open inside me. Dangerous. I turned to leave. His hand caught my wrist. Not hard, just enough to stop me. Mara? I looked back. One question, he said, and I'll let you go tonight. No cars, no roses, nothing until you come to me. I waited. Do you think about me? Every night, every hour, every breath. But I didn't say that. Yes, I whispered. Something flared in his eyes. Triumph, relief, hunger. He released my wrist. I left. I didn't sleep that night. I replayed his words. The opera. The way his voice had broken on the word exist. In June, my grandmother asked if she could visit her sister in Florida for a month. I'm strong enough now, she said. And you need space to breathe, Kara. I booked the ticket with money I'd saved from the bookstore. I drove her to the airport. She hugged me tight. Whatever you decide about him, she whispered in my ear, decide with your whole heart. Half measures will kill you slower than cancer. She boarded. I stood watching the plane take off until it was back. Then I went home to an empty apartment for the first time in years, silence that wasn't filled with coughing or worry. Just me and the weight of a choice. I lasted 4 days. On the 5th, I called the number I'd memorized but never saved. He answered on the first ring. Mara, I want to see you. Silence. Then, where? Your place, the lake house. I'll send the car. No, I'll drive myself. I hung up before he could argue. I packed a small bag, told myself it was just for a weekend. I drove upstate as dusk fell, windows down, music loud enough to drown thought. The gates were open. He waited on the steps again. No staff. Just him. I parked, got out. We stood 10 feet apart. I'm not staying, I said. I know. I'm not forgiving you. I know. I hate you. He stepped down 1 step. I know that too. Another step. Then why am I here? He stopped just in front of me. Because hate and want can live in the same body, and you're tired of pretending they can't. I slapped him, hard. His head snapped to the side. A red mark bloomed on his cheek. He didn't move. Slowly, he turned back to me, silver eyes burning. I kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It was teeth and anger, and months of fear turned inside out. He groaned into my mouth, hands coming up to fist in my hair, pulling just enough to hurt. We made it inside somehow. Clothes scattered from door to staircase. He took me against the wall first, fast, desperate, my back scraping paint, his mouth on my throat like he wanted to mark every inch. After, on the rug in front of a fire he hadn't lit yet, slower. He mapped my body with hands that trembled, whispered my name like prayer and curse. I bit his shoulder until I tasted blood. When it was over, we lay tangled, sweat cooling, breath ragged. He traced the scar on my ribs, an old one from childhood. I used to think I didn't have a soul, he said against my skin. Now? Now I think you stole it the night you dropped that 100 on the floor. I closed my eyes. This doesn't fix anything. No, he agreed, but it's a start. I stayed the weekend. We didn't talk about the future. We barely talked at all. Just bodies learning the language the words couldn't carry. On Sunday night, I dressed to leave. He watched from the doorway, shirtless, arms crossed. At the door, I paused. I'm not ready to come back yet. He nodded. But I'll call, when I am. Relief flickered across his face so raw it hurt. I drove home through dawn. My grandmother returned bronzed and smiling, full of stories about cousins and ocean air. Life resumed, but everything was different. I still worked at the bookstore. He still ran his empire. We didn't see each other for 6 weeks. Then, one night in August, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. A voice I didn't recognize. Male, panicked. "Miss Valenti, you need to come. Now. St. Vincent's emergency room. It's Moretti." The line went dead. I dropped the phone, grabbed my keys, drove like the city was on fire. The ER was chaos. I ran to the desk. "Vincenzo Moretti, where is he?" The nurse hesitated. "Family only." "I'm his." I stopped. What was I? The nurse must have seen something in my face. "Trauma 3, but he's in surgery." I found the waiting room, sat, waited. Hours. Finally, a doctor emerged, blood on his scrubs. "Miss Valenti?" I stood. "He's out of surgery. 3 bullets. 1 nicked the lung. He lost a lot of blood. But he's stable." I exhaled shakily. "Can I see him?" "He's heavily sedated, but he kept saying a name. Mara. We thought it might be you." They let me in. He was pale against the white sheets. Tubes and wires everywhere. I took his hand. His fingers twitched. Eyes fluttered. Focused on me. "Hey," I whispered. He tried to speak. Couldn't. I leaned close. "I'm here." His grip tightened weakly. Then his heart monitor spiked. Alarms blared. Nurses rushed in. Pushed me out. "Code blue!" I stood in the hallway, shaking, watching them shock him. Again. Again. Until the line went flat. And stayed flat. The doctor came out 20 minutes later. "I'm sorry." The world went silent. I don't remember leaving. I don't remember driving. I woke up in my apartment on the floor, throat raw from screaming. My phone had 30 missed calls, all from numbers I didn't know. 1 voicemail. His voice, recorded hours before the shooting. "Mara, if you get this, something's coming. Old business, my father's men. They found out about the files, about you. If anything happens to me, run. Take your grandmother and disappear. There's money in a locker at Grand Central. Key under the loose brick behind the bookstore. Live long. Hate me from far away." Beep. I played it again, and again, until the words stopped meaning anything. Then I stood, went to the kitchen, opened the drawer where I kept the encrypted drive information, and made a different choice. I called the U.S. Attorney's office, gave them everything, every file, every name, every date, including his. Because if he was dead, I didn't need insurance anymore. I needed vengeance. But he wasn't dead. I stood outside the hospital for a long time after the doctor delivered the news. The night air was thick with summer heat, but I couldn't feel it. Everything was numb. My skin, my lungs, the space behind my eyes where grief should have been exploding. They told me he was gone. Flatline. 23 minutes of resuscitation. Nothing. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just walked back inside, past the nurses who tried to stop me, and demanded to see the body. They hesitated, but something in my face made them step aside. The trauma bay was quiet now. Machines silent. Sheets pulled up to his shoulders. His face was untouched, pale, but still beautiful in that cruel, sharp way. Lips slightly parted, as if he'd been about to say my name one last time. I touched his cheek, cold already. I leaned down and whispered against his ear the thing I had never said while he was alive. "I loved you too, you bastard." Then I kissed his forehead, turned, and walked out. I drove home on autopilot. The city blurred past. Neon headlights. People laughing on sidewalks as if the world hadn't just ended. When I reached the apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat on the floor in the dark and played his voicemail again. And again. Until the words were carved into my bones. Old business. My father's men. They found out about the files. About you. He had known they were coming for him, and he had let them, to protect me, to give me the choice to destroy what was left of his family's empire without him in the way. He had chosen death over forcing me to live in his shadow. That was when the grief hit. Not soft, not gentle. It tore through me like shrapnel. I screamed until my voice gave out. I broke every glass in the kitchen. I curled on the bathroom floor and vomited until there was nothing left. At dawn, I showered, dressed in black, and went to Grand Central. The loose brick behind the bookstore was exactly where he'd said. Inside the locker, 2 duffels, one filled with cash, more than I could count, the other with documents, passports, birth certificates, a letter in his handwriting. Mara, if you're reading this, I failed to fix what my father broke. Take the money, take Nona, start over anywhere you want. The name on the Swiss account is yours now. No trace back to me. Live long, live free. I don't regret a single moment of knowing you, even the ones where you hated me. I closed the locker. I didn't take the bags. I went home. I called the U.S. attorney again. This time, I asked for a meeting in person. They sent 2 agents to a diner in Queens the next day. I laid everything out. The files, the recordings, the ledgers. I told them about my parents, about Vincenzo's confession, about the attempt on his life. I gave them names of the old guard, men still loyal to his dead father, who likely ordered the hit. I became the perfect cooperating witness. In exchange, they promised protection for my grandmother, a new life when it was over. Trials take time, years. I testified in closed sessions. I identified voices on tapes. I pointed to faces in photos. One by one, the old men fell. Arrests, indictments, seizures. The Moretti Empire crumbled from the inside, and every night I dreamed of him, of silver eyes watching me across a candlelit table, of hands that trembled when they touched me, of a voice saying my name like it was the only word that mattered. My grandmother moved to Florida permanently. I visited when I could, under guard. She never asked about him again. She just held my hand and said, "You're carrying too much, Kara." I smiled and lied. 2 years passed. The trials ended. The last of the old guard was sentenced to life. The city felt different, lighter somehow. I was 29 now. I had a new name on paper, but I never used it. I kept Mara Valenti because he had known that name, because it was the one he'd whispered in Stark. I moved to a small coastal town in Maine, bought a little bookstore with ocean views, stocked it with poetry and classics and crime novels I couldn't bring myself to read. I learned to live with the quiet. But some nights, when storms rolled in off the Atlantic, I stood on the porch and felt watched. I told myself it was imagination, grief playing tricks, until the night I came home from closing the shop and found a single red rose on the counter. No thorns. In a crystal vase I didn't own. My heart stopped. I didn't touch it. I backed out of the house, called my old contact at the FBI. They swept the place. No prints, no DNA, no cameras. Just the rose. They told me it was probably a prank. Someone who'd followed the trials. I nodded. I didn't sleep for a week. Then the second rose came. This time on my nightstand. While I was in the shower. The doors had been locked. The alarm armed. I moved. Rented a new place across town. Changed the locks again. Installed cameras. Nothing for 3 months. I started to breathe. Then, on the anniversary of his death, I woke to find the vase on my kitchen table. Inside, not a rose, a single white card. In handwriting I would know anywhere. I'm sorry I took so long. My hands shook so badly I dropped the card. I called the FBI again. They came. They tested everything. They told me the handwriting was a near-perfect match. But the man was dead. They had the body. They had dental records, DNA, autopsy. He was gone. I started seeing a therapist. I told her about the roses, about the dreams, about the guilt that lived under my skin like a second skeleton. She said it was survivor's complex, complicated grief, manifestation of unresolved feelings. I nodded. I took the pills she prescribed. They didn't stop the roses. They kept coming. Never more than one at a time. Always when I was alone. Always places no one could reach without me knowing. I stopped telling anyone. I started talking to him instead. Out loud, in the dark. You're dead. Leave me alone. Silence. I hate you for this. Silence. I miss you. That was when the notes began. Small things. A line from Tosca written on the sack of a bookstore receipt left on my windshield. A quote from Dante tucked into a library book I hadn't shelved yet. Always his handwriting. Always words about love and damnation. I stopped sleeping entirely. I lost weight again. I started drinking. One night in October, 3 years after his death, I came home drunk from the only bar in town. I slammed the door, screamed into the empty house. Show yourself, you coward! If you're alive, come here and face me. Silence. Then the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Went out. The room plunged into darkness. I froze. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Coming from the hallway. My heart thundered. The emergency lantern kicked on, dim red glow. And there he was. Standing in the doorway. Taller. Thinner. A scar running from his left temple down his cheek. New, jagged. Silver eyes fixed on me. Alive. I couldn't breathe. He took one step forward. Mara. His voice. Rougher now, but his. I backed up until I hit the counter. You're dead. I was. I shook my head. They identified. A body, he said quietly. Not mine. I stared at him. The men who came for me, they shot someone else. A decoy. I'd arranged it months before. In case. In case what? In case I needed to disappear to keep you safe. I laughed. It sounded hysterical. You let me grieve you for 3 years. Yes. You let me destroy your family. I helped you destroy it. I lunged at him, not to kiss, to hit. My fist slammed into his chest. He didn't stop me. I hit until my hands bruised, until I was sobbing, until I collapsed against him. He caught me, held me so tightly I couldn't breathe. I'm sorry, he whispered into my hair. I'm so sorry. I pulled back, looked at his face, the scar, the exhaustion in his eyes. Where have you been? Places no one looks, doing things no one should. Why come back now? He touched my cheek, gently, as if I might break. Because I couldn't stay away anymore. I stepped back, out of his reach. You don't get to do this. I know. You don't get to come back like a ghost and expect... I don't expect anything. He looked around the small kitchen, at the half-empty wine bottle, the dark circles under my eyes. I just needed you to know I didn't leave willingly. I wrapped my arms around myself. You should go. He nodded, slowly, but he didn't move. Instead, he reached into his coat, pulled out a familiar envelope, thick, cream stock, held it out. I didn't take it. He set it on the counter. Everything you need to disappear again. New identities, money, a house in Tuscany if you want it. Or Patagonia. Anywhere. I stared at the envelope. Why? Because I owe you a life. The one I took from you. He stepped back, toward the door. I won't come here again unless you call. He paused. hand on the knob. I love you, Mara Valenti. I loved you when you hated me. I loved you when I was dead. I'll love you when I'm dust. Then he was gone. The door closed softly. I stood there for a long time. Then I opened the envelope. Inside, passports, deeds, bank accounts, and a single red rose, pressed flat, preserved perfectly. On the back, in his handwriting, choose. I held the rose to my chest, and for the first time in 3 years, I cried without pain. Just release. I didn't call him that night, or the next. I thought. I walked the beach for days. I read the documents over and over. I burned the pills. I closed the bookstore for a week on the 7th night I drove to the edge of town, to the abandoned lighthouse no one visited. I climbed the stairs. He was there, waiting, looking out at the black ocean. He didn't turn when I approached. I stood beside him. We watched the waves in silence. Finally, I spoke. I'm not forgiving you. I know. I may never forgive you. I know. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the pressed rose, held it out over the railing, let the wind take it, watched it disappear into the dark. Then I took his hand. His fingers closed around mine like they'd been waiting forever. I looked at him. Take me home, Vincenzo. His eyes searched mine. Which home? I stepped closer. The one where you are. He exhaled like a man who'd been holding his breath for years. Then he pulled me into his arms, kissed me like drowning, like salvation, like the end of the world and the beginning of another. And I kissed him back, because hate and want had finally become the same thing, because some obsessions don't destroy you, they remake you, because I was never meant to escape him, and I no longer wanted to. But that wasn't the end. That was only the beginning of the war. Because the men who shot the decoy that night, they were still out there. And they knew he was alive now. They knew about me. And they were coming. We didn't go to the lake house. We didn't go to Tuscany or Patagonia or anywhere the envelopes promised. Instead, he took me to a place I didn't know existed, a fortified estate deep in the Adirondacks, hidden behind miles of private road and old-growth forest. No name on the gate, no record of ownership that could be traced. A gray stone fortress built into the side of a mountain, with windows that looked like eyes watching the only approach. He carried me over the threshold like a bride, even though I told him it was ridiculous. Inside, it was warm, wood fires already burning, staff that appeared and disappeared like ghosts, silent, loyal, faces I didn't recognize. He set me down in the great room, hands lingering on my waist. "This is yours now," he said, "whether you stay a day or a lifetime." I looked around. High ceilings, bookshelves to the rafters, a grand piano no one played, windows showing nothing but black trees and stars. It feels like a prison. It's the opposite, he said quietly. It's the only place in the world no one can take you from me. I turned to him. They're coming, aren't they? He didn't lie. Yes. Who? 3 captains from the old regime, my father's inner circle. They survived the trials because they ran to ground before the net closed. They've spent the last 3 years rebuilding in the shadows. Drugs through Canada, guns out of Florida. They know I'm alive. They know about the files. And they know about you. I felt the old fear rise, but it was different now. Sharper. Useful. How long? Weeks. Maybe less. I nodded. Then we don't run. He searched my face. What do you want to do, Mara? I stepped closer. I want to end it. Something dark and fierce lit in his eyes. You're sure? I've spent years being afraid. I'm done. He pulled me against him, forehead to mine. Then we end it together. The next days were preparation. He brought in men I didn't know, former special forces, ghosts from his past who owed him favors that could never be repaid. They moved through the house like wind, installing things I didn't understand. Sensors, cameras, charges in the woods. I learned to shoot. He stood behind me on the indoor range, hands over mine on the grip, voice calm in my ear. Breathe out. Squeeze. Don't pull. The first time I hit the center mass, he kissed the side of my neck. Good girl. I hated how much I liked it. We planned. Maps spread across the dining table, timelines, contingencies. He told me everything, who the three men were, their habits, their weaknesses. Luca Rossi, sadist, liked to hurt women before he killed them. Matteo Greco, paranoid, never slept in the same place twice. Salvatore De Luca, the oldest, the strategist, the one who had ordered my parents' deaths. I memorized their faces from photos. I dreamed of their blood. At night, we barely slept. We fucked like it was the last time every time. Slow and reverent on the rug in front of the fire. Hard and punishing against the cold stone walls. In the shower until the water ran cold. He marked me, bruises on my hips, teeth on my throat. I marked him back, scratches down his back, nails in his shoulders. We spoke in languages older than words. One night after, lying tangled in sheets that smelled of gun oil and sex, I asked the question I'd avoided. Why didn't you just kill them yourself while you were dead? He traced the curve of my spine. Because I wanted to be clean for you. I thought if I came back with more blood on my hands, you'd never let me touch you again. I turned to face him. And now? Now, he said, voice rough. I'll drown in it if it keeps you safe. I kissed him then, tasted the future on his tongue. They came on a night when the first snow fell. Silent. Heavy flakes that muffled the world. We knew they were close when the outer sensors tripped. Vincenzo was already dressed, black fatigues, holster strapped to his thigh. He handed me a vest. Put it on. I did. He checked the fit, fingers clinical. Then he cupped my face. If anything goes wrong, nothing will. If it does, he continued, there's a tunnel from the wine cellar. It comes out 2 miles north, truck waiting, keys under the driver's seat. You drive until you hit the border, then you disappear. I covered his hands with mine. I'm not leaving without you. He looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he kissed me. Hard, desperate. Then we moved. The house went dark. Only red, emergency lights. His men fanned out. We took positions in the great room behind overturned tables reinforced with steel plates. I held the rifle he'd trained me with. My hands didn't shake. The first breach came at the east wing. Explosion that rattled the windows. Then gunfire. Controlled bursts from our side. Screams from theirs. I waited. Vincenzo's voice in my earpiece. Calm. Steady. 3 teams. Rossi's on the north. Greco south. De Luca holding back. I breathed. Minutes stretched. Then the south door blew inward. 2 men in tactical gear. Our side opened fire. They dropped. But more came. I fired when Vincenzo said fire. Felt the recoil shudder through my shoulder. Saw a man fall. Didn't feel anything yet. Adrenaline sang in my veins. They pushed harder. We pushed back. Bodies piled. Then silence. Too long. Vincenzo's voice. They're pulling back, regrouping. I reloaded. We moved to the upper hallway. Better sight lines. That's when I saw him. Salvatore De Luca. Old now. Gray hair, but the same cold eyes from the photos. He stood at the bottom of the grand staircase, flanked by 4 men. Unarmed himself. Arrogant. He called up, "Vincenzo, send the girl down. We'll let you walk." Vincenzo's hand tightened on his weapon. I stepped forward, into the light. DeLuca's eyes found me. Smiled. "You look like your mother." Rage blinded me. I raised the rifle. Vincenzo stopped me. "Not yet," DeLuca continued. "Your father begged, you know, at the end. Begged us to spare you and the old woman." I felt Vincenzo tense beside me. DeLuca spread his hands. "Come down, Mara. End this cleanly." I looked at Vincenzo. He met my eyes, gave the smallest nod. I stepped to the railing. Alone. Lowered the rifle, started down the stairs. Vincenzo hissed my name. I didn't stop. Halfway down, DeLuca smiled wider. "That's it." When I was 10 steps away, I stopped. "Look at me," I said. He did. I smiled. Then I pulled the knife from my boot, the same switchblade I'd carried the night in the park years ago, and threw it. It buried in his throat. "Perfect." He gurgled, clutched the handle, dropped to his knees. His men hesitated. That was all we needed. Vincenzo and the others opened fire from above. It was over in seconds. DeLuca bled out on the marble, eyes wide, surprised. I stood over him, watched the life leave, whispered, "For my parents." Then I turned away. The cleanup took hours. Bodies removed, blood mopped. By dawn, the snow had covered the tracks outside. Inside, the house smelled of pine and gunpowder. We stood in the great room. Just us now. His men gone back to wherever they came from. Vincenzo looked at me, covered in soot and blood that wasn't mine. "You okay?" I nodded. Then I started shaking. He caught me before I fell. Held me while the adrenaline crash hit. Rocked me like a child. "It's over," he whispered. "It's really over." We buried the past in the woods. That week, no markers, just earth and snow. Spring came early to the mountains. I planted roses along the south wall, red ones, with thorns. We lived quietly. He managed what was left of legitimate businesses from afar. I wrote. Not this story. Not yet. Just journals. Pages and pages of everything I'd carried alone. One night in June, I found him in the library, staring at an ultrasound photo. I hadn't told him yet. He looked up, eyes wide. "Is this—" I nodded. He crossed the room in 3 strides, dropped to his knees, pressed his face to my stomach, hands trembling. I threaded my fingers through his hair. "We're having a girl," I said. He made a sound, half laugh, half sob. Looked up at me. Silver eyes shining. "I don't know how to be a father." "You'll learn." "I'm terrified." "Me too." He stood, kissed me softly. "I'll spend every day making sure she never knows the world we came from." I believed him. Years passed. Our daughter grew. Dark hair, gray eyes, fierce like her father, stubborn like me. We taught her strength, not violence. We taught her love, not possession. The house filled with laughter, with music, with life. Some nights, when storms rolled in, I still felt watched. But now I knew it was just memory, just ghosts that couldn't touch us anymore. One evening, on the anniversary of the night I threw that $100 bill back, I found him on the terrace, watching the sunset. I wrapped my arms around him from behind. He covered my hands with his. "Regrets?" I asked. He turned in my arms, looked at me like I was the only thing in his world. Because I was. "Only that I didn't find you sooner." I smiled. "Liar." He laughed, then kissed me. Slow, deep, the way we had learned to do everything now, without hurry, without fear. Later, in bed, he traced the faint scar on my shoulder from that final night. whispered against my skin. You remade me, Mara. I pulled him closer, and you broke me open. We fell asleep, tangled, dreaming the same dream, of red roses, of snow falling silent, of a life we never deserved, but took anyway, because some obsessions don't destroy, they redeem, and some humiliations, they become the beginning of everything. If you liked the story, drop a comment for part 2, and don't forget to subscribe to Mara's Betrayal.